Responses? The member for Orléans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's an honour to rise and mark National Housing Day today. I'd like to first thank all of the partners in Ottawa that help provide housing, Ottawa Housing, Cumberland Housing, Habitat for Humanity, and many, many others that provide housing in Ottawa and Orleans for the important work that they do in our community to provide housing supports to those most in need. The cost of both owning and renting a home has exponentially increased and is now out of control, Mr. Speaker. According to RBC and TD Bank, housing prices in Ontario are up between 16% and 20% this year, if not more. And in Ottawa, they're up 18%. In Toronto, it's closer to 28%, Mr. Speaker. It's becoming increasingly difficult for young people and young families to enter into the housing market and purchase their first home. It's also becoming increasingly difficult for seniors and older adults to downsize, freeing up important housing stock in existing built-out communities. There isn't sufficient purpose-built rental close to where their children and they hope their grandchildren will be establishing themselves. Selling the family home to downsize is making less and less financial sense, and the supply options simply aren't there, Mr. Speaker. This is a critical transition to free up supply in our existing communities to help younger families enter into the housing market. The government must take stronger actions to make this housing type easier to build and more affordable so that this important transition can take place. I'd also like to take a moment, Mr. Speaker, to talk about an important part of our affordable housing stock that often gets overlooked, and that is co-ops. Co-ops are a critical element to our housing supply. There's something like 125,000 Ontarians living in 500 different not-for-profit co-ops in the province. And most of these co-ops were built, upwards of 30 years ago. Their mortgages are quickly coming to an end. Now, for most of us, Mr. Speaker, being mortgage-free would be a time to celebrate. But for these co-ops, it's potentially will mean a drastic reduction in their operating subsidy. It will impact their ability to provide rent and property tax assistance to their members and make it harder to make the capital improvements necessary to renew these aging buildings. Now, there are billions and billions of dollars of renewal and rehabilitation that's needed in Ontario's co-ops, and they require certainty in their operating subsidy so they can refinance and make these necessary investments. Now, these investments in renewal can potentially help maintain or create thousands of jobs in construction and maintenance and the renovation construction industry, Mr. Speaker. It will be critical to maintaining this valuable housing stock and creating jobs at the same time. And finally, Mr. Speaker, in a week where we're starting to talk more and more about how we can take stronger actions to combat racism and Islamophobia, we must recognize that these are important factors and elements in the housing crisis that we are experiencing. Too many Ontario Muslims and people of South Asian heritage face housing insecurity. And while there are many contributing factors to this reality, we cannot deny that Islamophobia plays a contributing role. We must ensure that every Ontarian, no matter where they come from, what God they pray to, what kind of clothes they wear, or the colour of their skin, has access to affordable housing. It is a basic human right, Mr. Speaker. We must ensure that everyone can live without the anxiety of not knowing where they will lay their head at night or needing to choose between paying the rent and buying groceries for breakfast or lunch or supper for their kids. We have an obligation to our neighbours, Mr. Speaker, to our children, and to each other to make this happen in Ontario. Thank you.